The Italian Wine Podcast is the community-driven platform for Italian wine geeks around the world. Support the show by donating at ItalianWinepodcast.com. Donate €5 or more and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, My Italian Grape Geek Journal, absolutely free. To get your free copy of My Italian Grape Geek Journal, click Support Us at ItalianWinepodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. Grazie mille. Welcome to the Italian Grape Geek podcast. Join us as we explore personal stories of travel and tasting with Italy's must-know grape varietals. Chart your own course with My Italian Grape Geek Journal, your personal tasting companion to accompany the series. Available now on Amazon. With thanks to Colangelo and Partners for their generous support with this project.
Hi, I'm back. I'm Emilia, and I'm going to talk about one of the most important grape varieties of Trentino, which is Teroldego. Of course, in Trentino, great wealth of grape varieties, Teroldego is the king. The proof lies right in his name, which might derive from the German dialect word for the golden one from Tirolo. So it's already in its name, it signifies the importance of this grape throughout the history of the region. We have the first recordings in history dating back to the 13th century. So with such surprising credentials, it's not a surprise that the wines made of Teroldego grape were served at the Royal Court of Vienna, nonetheless of the Royal Court of Vienna, and in the other very fashionable European cities of the 19th century. A different theory, probably coming from a more practical point of view, would actually link the name Teroldego to a most traditional and ancient training system, which is tirelle, basically the wires that hold ancient vineyards together, and they were typical of Mezzo Lombardo, which is one of the famous towns where actually Teroldego is still produced nowadays. And the beauty of Teroldego is actually that it remains deeply bound to its mountains and the unique environment of the Piana Rotagliana. And it's one of the few actually DOC denominations in Italy where the correlation between the location and the variety is very specific. It might be a sibling to Lagrein, which is the other rock star of Trentino, of course, maybe closely related to Durezza, so a parent of Syrah, but it might be also related to Pinot Noir. So coming from different perspectives, I think what the name suggests, at least to me, is that is a wine of noble origins, meaning that is related to noble wine varieties of the world, that it was presented to the most noble tables probably of the 18th and 19th century. Also, the name might, to me, suggest, something very official. Teroldego in the name, brings about a lot of weight. And again, is one of those grapes that almost risked extinction after the Second World War. A lot of things happened after the Second World War in the Italian viticultural scenario, because coming from a war that we badly lost, we had actually to rebuild a nation, and agriculture was big part of it. Unfortunately, that meant for many small farmers that were the custodians and the guardians of indigenous grape varieties, that meant, to abandon them in favor of more and better yielding international grape varieties that could generate also a better and faster turnover in terms of money, let's say. So again, Teroldego, similar story to many of our beloved Italian grape varieties, risked extinction in the Second World War. But we have to thank one very talented winemaker, an incredible woman that I admire fully and that I think is one of the best winemakers to have graced Italy in the last 30 years, who's Elisabetta Foradori, that managed on her own, basically, to bring back the grape to the international stage. Of course, she came in with a different view about how to grow the grape, and the wines that she wanted to make put a lot of emphasis on lowering the yield to try to produce better grapes, introduced Guyot vine training as well. And literally, gradually, step by step, she kind of rebuilt the image of Teroldego. It helped the fact that she's a natural wine producer, and I think her battle to actually rescue Teroldego tied in very well with the narrative around herself and her brand, let's say. So, I'm a natural wine producer. I'm very close to the land. I respect the terroir where I'm coming from, and I respect Teroldego as being the ambassador of such a territory. Obviously, she's the first name that comes to my mind if I have to pick a Teroldego. Very recently, I had a bottle of 2020 Teroldego, which I had to decant, very brief decanting, but it brought out immediately how brilliant the Teroldego wines can be. When we mentioned that it was probably related to Pinot Noir, I think it resonates a lot with what I saw and I tasted after decanting the wine. The brilliance in the color, quite a bright ruby red. It's much more concentrated, though, than a Pinot Noir because the grape has an highest concentration of anthocyanins. When I tasted the wine, actually, the aromas were very crunchy, very alive. You know, these red berries, cherries that came to the forefront quite strongly. But, you know, at the back, I could feel there was something else, you know, building up. There's a lot of floral components, quite a savory note to it. I think that the savoriness is very much creation of Foradori. I tasted other Teroldego that might be more fruity driven, maybe less complex, but quite vivid as well. Because it's so widely cultivated in the region of Trentino, you know, you can also find different variation or different deliveries, different expressions of Teroldego. Some producers prefer it to make, you know, more a fruity forward type of Teroldego. Other producers, you know, play mainly on the balance between savory and terry notes. So you can really have a spectrum of different options. Of course, Foradori, once again, she's the expert in the field. But if you're looking also to have a Teroldego, maybe a Teroldego Riserva, go to Mazzacorona, always very good value for money. I know it's a co-op, but it's a really good co-op. They deliver quality for a really sweet price point. Another one that I like is Zeni, smaller producer, of course, family run, and Marion. In terms of food pairings, again, I would lean toward cured meats like prosciutto or maybe speck, which is a type of smoked prosciutto, like which is aged for a little bit longer, and bacon. I think it really calls for bacon or, you know, spaghetti carbonara, for example, you know, with the egg. And if you know Italian cuisine, you know how to make a carbonara with guanciale and not with pancetta. But in general, everything that has a smokiness to it. I'm also thinking roast beef, for example. Other more earthier meat, like goulash, for example, or venison stews, would of course call for a more structured type of Teroldego, maybe a Teroldego Riserva, a wine that comes from, of course, a longer aging with more concentration, bigger structure, and so on. Because I'm also a vegetarian, I would maybe recommend you try a vegan option as well, maybe with a plant-based burger. I'm thinking, you know, something aubergine-based with some root vegetable chips.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, for fascinating videos covering Stevie Kim and her travels across Italy and beyond, meeting winemakers, eating local food, and taking in the scenery. Now back to the show.
Hello, this is Emilia. I'm back. Now we're talking about one of the coolest white grape varieties of Italy right now, which is Timorasso. Again, with Timorasso, we go back to that amazing history of Italian grape varieties when most of the indigenous grapes were actually threatened by, you know, industrialization and the widening of the agricultural policies after the Second World War. Even though we had records of Timorasso being grown in the province of Alessandra, of course we are in Piemonte, already in the 14th century, the grape kind of went through different phases through its life, being very popular, pre-phylloxera, and then almost risking extinction, you know, after the Second World War, as we were saying. In this case, as in many other stories that we encountered when we obviously faced the Italian grape heritage, we're talking about the grape that almost went extinct, but it was single-handedly rescued by a winemaker, who was Walter Massa, who's definitely one of the heroes of Italian wines. So Walter very, very cleverly understood the potential of growing a white grape in a land, of course, mostly renowned for great red wines made with Nebbiolo. So he understood that there was a potential of having an equally successful, but also an equally challenging grape to grow there, that he could build, his reputation on. So Timorasso fit the bill perfectly. As we said, it comes from almost a history of near extinction. I got into this momentum of coolness, let's say. The reason why is because Timorasso, when it's done well, it can remind us of another very popular white grape variety among nerds, which is Riesling, of course. So it can actually develop similar flavors, especially after quite a long aging. The minerality really becomes more noticeable, also accompanied by tertiary notes, which really refine the wine and makes it as interesting as a Riesling could be. So a wine that can be drunk young, where it's more lively and tangy fruitiness are to be appreciated, but also it has the potential of aging further, bringing out aromatic notes like petrol, hydrocarbons, which of course are a remarkable feature of this varietal. Every time I have the chance to taste Timorasso, the first thing that comes to mind, talking about, of course, food, is cheese. I think Timorasso makes a great companion to most of the cheese of the Piemontese tradition. I'm thinking Toma above anything else. But also, it could be a really great pairing for vitello tonnato, which is veal with tuna sauce, one of the staples of the Piemontese cuisine. Again, trying to balance fresher notes with creaminess of this dish, of course. If you have an aged Timorasso, a great match, I would say a match made in heaven, is with saffron risotto and truffles. So the areas where, of course, Timorasso is grown and is famous for, it's the Colli Tortonesi DOC. Again, we are in Piemonte, an amazing region also to visit. And the benchmark producers are, of course, I'm going to start with the master himself, Walter Massa. If you want to explore different expression of these varieties, try Mandirola, Vigneti Repetto, one of my favorites, I have to say. Smaller producers can really give an edge to this grape. If you're looking for a good value for money, try Cantina di Tortona, which is the Cantina Sociale. To be totally honest with you guys, I met Timorasso and I tasted my first Timorasso not very long ago. I was probably working at the time for an Italian wine agency, and they sent me to taste some Timorasso because they were looking for some to add to their portfolio. So we are really talking about 5 years ago. Consider that I've been doing this job for over 20 years. Since the first time I tasted it, I immediately understood the potential of Timorasso to become one of the most sought after white wines of Italy, to be honest with you. He has so many layers of complexity that he can bring to the glass that is built up quite a following, to be honest. From the very nerdy sommelier of New York to someone that is eager to discover white grapes beyond your usual Chardonnay. Hello everyone, this is Emilia and I'm back to talk about Uva di Troia. Uva di Troia, it's also commonly referred to as Nero di Troia, and it's a high quality grape variety from Puglia that shares the same origins as Negro Amaro and Primitivo, which, as we know, are quite popular wines. What stands out in the name is, of course, the reference to Troy, the epic town from which apparently Diomede escaped to actually found the town of Troia in Puglia. So the reference is quite epic, as we were saying, and so is the wine. Because, try to imagine among the bulk production of grapes that, made Puglia really famous as a wine region in the past, Nero di Troia really stood out. First of all, it has this very intense color that, of course, suggests quite an intense, quite a warm climate where it comes from. It's almost like purplish, which I think is what makes it really, really cool. The bouquet, of course, is quite intense. It's quite charming. It's quite fruity. But compared to his relatives, his siblings from Apulia, he has this much more floral bouquet, like think of violets, think of this type of flower. So it's quite pleasant since you smell it in the glass. It brings a lot of different flavors that mingle together. It has this very distinctive fruity profile, but it's not as ripe as, for example, Primitivo, that is more or less from the same area. And it's much more lively, fresh for acidity. That's what I meant. So it makes it a really, really pleasant red wine also to drink in the summer. But I would actually prefer it to drink it in cooler days, especially paired with roasted meat, stuff and stew poultry. And one of the favorite pairing that I could recommend, being, of course, a vegetarian myself, will be with Orecchiette di Cime di Rapa, which is the champion of Puglia. When you don't know what to eat in Puglia, you can always count on Orecchiette di Cime di Rapa, which is going to really make your day. Of course, Uva di Troia, as we were saying, is hailing from Apulia, but let's say the best Uva di Troia wines that you can find is in Castel di Monte, and is two subzones, Castel del Monte Rosso Riserva, Castel del Monte Nero di Troia Riserva di OCG. The benchmark producers, of course, Rivera, which makes really great varietal wines from the area. I have a favorite, which is Michele Biancardi. Again, a small producer, very focused on sustainable viticulture. It delivers, again, a great Nero di Troia. If you're looking for something really, really peculiar, it's Cantina Carpentiere, that delivers a really rare example of Nero di Troia vinified white.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.